The massive council chambers of the Zephyrian Confederacy stretched across several floors, filled with representatives from dozens of alien species. The air hummed with translation devices working overtime as different languages merged into a cacophony of diplomatic chatter. But today all conversation had stopped. Every eye, tentacle, and sensory organ was focused on the holographic display floating in the center of the room. Earth burned on the screen. The third planet from Sol was dying slowly, its blue oceans turning black as solar radiation stripped away the atmosphere. Massive flares erupted from the sun, sending waves of deadly energy toward the helpless world below. Cities that had stood for centuries were already nothing but ash. The polar ice caps had melted and boiled away in a matter of hours. Ambassador Vexthal of the Zephyrian Empire stood at the center podium, his forearms spread wide in a gesture of mock sympathy. His species looked like a cross between a praying mantis and a spider, with glossy black carapaces and compound eyes that reflected the dying light of Earth. When he spoke, his mandibles clicked together in rhythm, creating a sound that his translator converted into words. "Behold," he announced to the chamber, "the fate of species who never learned to master their own stars." The other delegates murmured agreement. The Altarian Republic's representative, a being made of living crystal, chimed in harmonious notes of amusement. The Drakmari Collective's ambassador, a creature that looked like a floating jellyfish with too many eyes, pulsed with colors that indicated cruel joy. They had all received the same transmissions from Earth over the past week. Desperate pleas for help, requests for evacuation ships, offers to share their primitive technology in exchange for rescue. The messages had grown more frantic each day as the solar flares intensified. Dr. Hannah Kim's voice crackled through the chamber speakers once again. Her transmission was weak, breaking up as Earth's communication satellites failed one by one. "This is Dr. Kim from the International Space Research Facility. We're broadcasting on all frequencies. Our sun has become unstable. We estimate 72 hours before the surface becomes uninhabitable. We have 12 billion people who need evacuation. Please, if anyone can hear this, we need help." The static grew worse. Behind her voice, they could hear alarms blaring, and people shouting in panic. "We have families here, children. We're willing to work, to serve, to give you anything you want. Just please help us get off this world before it's too late." Vexthal's mandibles clicked faster, the alien equivalent of laughter. "Listen to how they beg," he said, turning to address his fellow ambassadors. "They offer to serve us, as if they have anything we could possibly want." The Corvalian delegate, a slug-like being with dozens of eye stalks, spoke up. What could they possibly offer? They have barely achieved faster-than-light communication. Their ships can barely reach their own moon without crashing. "Exactly," Vexel agreed. "They're asking us to waste resources on a species that couldn't even prevent their own extinction. Natural selection at work, I would say." Another transmission came through, this one from a different source. A young man's voice, speaking Korean, but translated by their systems. "My name is Jinwoo Park. I'm broadcasting from Seoul. The city is burning around me. The sky is on fire. If anyone out there can hear this, please remember that we existed. We tried to reach the stars, tried to be better." Transmission cut to static. The chamber fell silent for a moment. Then Vexthal began his clicking. Laughter again, and soon the entire room joined in. The Drakmari pulsed bright purple with glee. The Altarians chimed like broken bells. The Corvalians made wet sucking sounds that passed for humor in their culture. They tried to reach the stars, mocked the Drakmari ambassador through his translator. How touching. They managed to put a few metal cans in orbit and thought they were ready to join galactic civilization. "Perhaps we should send them a message," suggested the Corvalian. "Tell them that the galaxy has standards." "No," Vexel decided. "Let them die thinking they were ignored by an empty universe. It's more poetic that way." The holographic display showed Earth's final moments in real time. The atmosphere had become a swirling mass of superheated gas. The oceans had turned to steam. The continents were barely visible through the toxic clouds that covered everything. Dr. Hannah Kim's voice came through one last time. It's very faint now. This is our final transmission. To whoever might be listening years from now, humanity existed. We loved, we dreamed, we reached for the stars, even when we knew we would never touch them. Remember us. The signal died. Earth continued burning on the display, but there were no more voices calling out from its surface. 12 billion humans had been silenced forever, their civilization erased by their own star's fury. Vextel turned off the display with a casual gesture. Well, he announced to the chamber, that was mildly entertaining. Now, shall we discuss the trade agreements with the Centauri colonies? The delegates returned to their usual business, already forgetting about the small blue world that had died while they watched. After all, primitive species went extinct every day throughout the galaxy. It was simply the natural order of things. None of them noticed the small, fast-moving objects that had launched from Earth's moon just before. The transmissions ended. The dark side of the moon had kept humanity's greatest secret for over 200 years. As Earth's atmosphere turned to fire below, massive doors that had been invisible to any scanning technology suddenly opened across the lunar surface. What emerged defied everything the galactic civilizations thought they knew about human capability, Captain. Jim and Park felt the vibration through the deck plates as the generation ship, New Sol, powered up its main engines for the first time. The vessel stretched nearly 20 kilometers from bow to stern, its hull made from materials that didn't exist in any alien database. Around him, 50 identical ships rose from hidden bays carved deep into asteroids and moons throughout the solar system. "Status report," Jimin called out, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were about to attempt. "All systems showing green across the board," replied Dr. Yuna Lee from her position at the quantum fold control station. Her fingers danced across controls that looked nothing like the crude technology the aliens had observed from Earth's surface. "Transmissions. The drives are responding perfectly." Jimin turned to watch the main display screen. Earth was a burning ball of orange and red, its surface completely covered in flames that reached up into space. But he felt no sadness. This had always been the plan. Communications Officer Min-Ho Choi looked up from his station. "Captain, I'm picking up confused chatter from Confederacy monitoring posts. They're trying to figure out where we came from." "Let them wonder," Jimin said quietly. He activated the ship-wide communication system. "Attention all hands. This is Captain Park. Today we leave the solar system forever. But we do not leave as refugees. We leave as the next stage of human evolution." Throughout the ship, families who had lived in the hidden lunar cities for generations prepared for departure. Children who had never seen Earth's surface except in recordings pressed their faces against viewing ports. Their parents and grandparents had dedicated their lives to this moment, building these ships in secret while the rest of humanity lived normal lives on the dying planet below. Dr. Yuna Lee had spent 30 years perfecting the quantum fold technology. While alien civilizations used crude hyperspace jumps that took weeks to cross the galaxy, humanity had learned to fold space itself. They could travel instantly between any 2 points in the universe, appearing anywhere without warning. "Dr. Lee," Jimin asked, "how long until the Confederacy figures out our technology?" "Never," she replied with confidence. "They're still using particle physics from 1,000 years ago. They never learned to manipulate quantum foam at the subatomic level. To them, what we're doing is impossible." Minho spoke up again. "Captain, I'm receiving final status reports from all 50 ships. The Busan Rising reports full readiness. The Daegu Explorer confirms all civilian families are secure. The Incheon Defiant has completed weapons system checks." "Weapons?" Jimin raised an eyebrow. "Yes, sir. Each ship carries enough firepower to destroy a small planet. Dr. Lee's team also developed ways to turn stars into weapons." Dr. Yuna Lee nodded grimly. "We've been listening to alien transmissions for decades while they ignored us. We know the location of every Confederacy world, every military base, every weakness in their defenses. We've been preparing for this day since the first alien signal reached Earth." "They think we're primitive," Jimin said, looking at the tactical display that showed Confederacy ships scattered across the galaxy. "They think we never developed beyond basic spaceflight." "That's what we wanted them to think," Dr. Lee replied. While they watched our surface cities and laughed at our simple rockets, we were building a civilization they couldn't detect. Every asteroid mining operation was actually a shipyard. Every lunar research station was actually a military base. The bridge crew worked in silence for several minutes, running final system checks. These people had trained their entire lives for this moment. They were the best humanity had to offer, selected from birth to crew the Exodus ships. Minho announced, "All ships report ready for quantum fold jump." Jimin took a deep breath. Once they left, there would be no returning to the solar system. Earth would continue to burn until it was nothing but a dead rock circling a dying star. But 50 ships carrying the future of humanity would be free. Among the stars, Dr. Lee, are our destination coordinates locked in? Yes, sir. We'll scatter across the galaxy to 50 different systems, dead systems that the Confederacy has never bothered to explore. We'll establish hidden bases and continue building our fleet. And then Dr. Lee's expression hardened. Then we wait. We learn. We grow stronger. And someday, when we're ready, we'll remind the galaxy what happens when you watch children burn. Jimin nodded and turned to the communication station. Minho, open a channel to all ships. Channel open, Captain. This is Captain Park to all Exodus fleet vessels. Execute quantum fold jump on my mark. Remember, we are not running away. We are positioning ourselves for what comes next. He paused, looking one last time at the burning planet that had been humanity's home. Execute Exodus protocol. Jump. The 50 ships vanished simultaneously, folding space around themselves and disappearing into the void between galaxies. The Confederacy monitoring stations detected only empty space, where moments before they had registered impossible energy readings. Humanity was gone, leaving behind no trace except a dying world and confused alien observers who would spend decades trying to understand what they had witnessed. 50 years had passed since the Exodus ships vanished from the dying solar system. In that time, humanity had transformed from refugees into something the galaxy had never seen before, hidden in the dark spaces between stars. In systems that the Confederacy had marked as worthless and empty, entire cities now floated in the cold void. Admiral Jimin Park is no longer the young captain who had led the escape from Earth. His hair had turned completely white, and deep lines marked his face from decades of responsibility. A scar ran from his left temple to his jaw, a reminder of the asteroid mining accident that had nearly killed him 15 years ago. But his eyes still burned with the same determination that had carried humanity away from their dying world. The war room aboard New Sol had grown considerably over the years. What had once been a simple bridge now sprawled across 3 levels, filled with holographic displays showing every corner of the galaxy. Hundreds of officers worked at stations that monitored alien communications, tracked ship movements, and analyzed weaknesses in Confederacy defenses. "Report," Jimin said as he entered the room, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had led humanity through its darkest period. "Commander." Han rose from her chair at the tactical station. She had been barely 20 when the Exodus began, a junior officer aboard the Busan Rising. She commanded one of the most powerful warships humanity had ever built. Her ship alone carried enough firepower to destroy entire solar systems. "Admiral, our surveillance network confirms that the Confederacy still believes humanity is extinct," she reported. "They've never even attempted to search for survivors. To them, we're just another failed civilization." Dr. Yuna Lee approached from the science station, moving slowly but with purpose. Her once black hair was now silver, but her mind remained as sharp as the day she had invented quantum fold technology. In the decades since the Exodus, she had continued her research, pushing the boundaries of what was possible. "We've achieved something remarkable," Dr. Lee announced to the assembled commanders. "We can now manipulate stellar physics on a level that makes our enemy's technology look primitive." She activated a holographic display that showed the inner workings of a star. The image rotated slowly, revealing layers of superheated gas and magnetic fields that danced in complex patterns. "Every star is essentially a controlled fusion reaction," she explained. "The Confederacy treats them as unchangeable forces of nature. They build around stars, harvest their energy, but they never learn to control them directly. Admiral Jimin leaned forward, studying the display. What are you saying, Doctor? I'm saying we can turn any star into a weapon, can make it flare on command, destabilize its core, or even cause it to collapse into a black hole. The aliens who watched Earth burn will learn what it feels like when their own skies turn against them. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Around the table sat commanders who had been born in the Exodus ships, children who had never known planetary life. They had grown up hearing stories of Earth's final days, of the alien laughter that echoed through space as their home world died. Commander Tae-young Kim of the Daegu Explorer spoke first. How long would it take to implement this technology across the fleet? The weapon systems are already installed, Dr. Lee replied. Every ship in our fleet has been equipped with stellar manipulation devices. We've been testing them on dead stars and uninhabited systems for the past 10 years. What about range? Commander Ji-ho-bae from the Incheon Defiant. Can we strike multiple targets simultaneously? Yes. Our quantum fold technology means we can appear anywhere in the galaxy instantly. We could hit every major Confederacy world at the same time, if necessary. Admiral Jimin stood and walked to the main display, which showed a map of known Confederacy territory. Dozens of systems were marked in red, representing worlds where billions of aliens lived in comfort and prosperity. They had built their civilization on the bones of extinct species like humanity, never considering that the dead might someday return. 50 years ago, they watched our children burn, he said quietly. They laughed while our world died. Could have saved billions of lives, but they chose to be entertained instead. He turned to face the assembled commanders. Most of them had been children during the Exodus, but they all carried the same anger that had driven humanity into the darkness between stars. The question now is simple, Jimin continued. Do we reveal ourselves and demand justice? Or do we strike without warning? Wan Sujan Han stood up. Admiral, with respect, they showed us no mercy when we begged for our lives. Why should we show them any now? Because Dr. Lee interjected. We're better than they are. Destroy every Confederacy world, but that would make us no different from them. What do you suggest? Jimin asked. We give them a choice. Surrender and accept responsibility for what they did to Earth, or face the consequences. No. But we make sure they understand that we have the power to burn their worlds just as they burned ours. Admiral Jimin nodded slowly. The time for hiding was over. Humanity had spent 50 years growing stronger in the darkness, building weapons that could reshape the galaxy itself. Now it was time to remind the Confederacy that the dead could return with terrible purpose. Very well, he announced. Begin. Preparations for the reckoning. It's time the galaxy learned what happens when you mock the dying. The morning on Zephyr Prime began like any other in the past 50 years. The twin suns cast their familiar golden light across the crystal spires of the capital city, where millions of Zephyrians went about their daily lives. Ambassador Vextal was in his private office, reviewing trade agreements with the outer colonies, when his assistant burst through the door. Sir, you need to see this immediately, the young Zephyrian said. His compound eyes wide with panic, Vextal looked up from his documents, annoyed at the interruption. What could possibly be so urgent that you forget proper protocol? The sky, sir? Something's wrong with the sky? Through the massive windows of his office, Vextal could see that the morning light had changed. Instead of the usual golden glow, the suns were pulsing with deep red energy. Streams of plasma were shooting out from their surface in controlled bursts, reaching toward the outer planets of the system. Impossible, Vextal muttered, pressing his face against the window. Stars don't behave that way. Across the city, emergency sirens began to wail. The Zephyrian Military Command Center was in chaos as reports flooded in from across their territory. 12 different star systems were experiencing the same phenomenon. Their suns were becoming unstable, but not in any natural way. On the bridge of New Seoul, Admiral Jimin Park watched the tactical displays with grim satisfaction. 50 years of planning had led to this moment. Around him, his officers coordinated the most ambitious military operation in galactic history.
All fleets.
Report successful quantum fold insertion, announced Communications Officer Min-ho Choi. now a gray-haired veteran. "We have ships positioned around 12 major Confederacy systems. Stellar manipulation devices are online," reported Dr. Yuna Lee from her science station. "We have complete control over the gravitational fields of all target stars."
Admiral.
Jimin activated the galaxy-wide communication array. Its weathered face appeared on every screen, every communication device, every holographic display across Confederacy space. Aliens who had lived in comfort for centuries suddenly found themselves looking at the ghost of a species they thought was extinct. "Citizens of the Confederacy," Jimin began, his voice carrying across thousands of light years. 50 years ago, you watched our world burn. You laughed while our children screamed for help. You mocked us as we begged for mercy." On Zephyr Prime, Vexthal staggered backward from his window. The face on the communication screen was older now, marked by decades of hardship, but he recognized it. These were the humans, the primitive species that had died when their star went wild. "Impossible," he whispered. "They're extinct. We watched them die. You believed that you had witnessed the natural end of an inferior species, but you were wrong. We survived. We learned. We grew strong in the darkness between stars." Across the Altarian system, Commander Suyan Han coordinated the stellar manipulation from her position aboard. Busan Rising. The Altarians were a peaceful species, known for their crystal-based technology and beautiful art. They had been among the loudest voices laughing at Earth's destruction 50 years ago. "Target stars responding to gravitational manipulation," she reported to Admiral Jimin. "Corona expansion is proceeding as planned." The Altarian homeworld's population watched in terror as their blue sun began to pulse with angry red light. Solar flares reached out like giant fingers, touching the outer moons and turning them into balls of fire. The beautiful crystal cities that had stood for millennia began to crack under the heat. "Evacuation fleets are launching from all major colonies," Commander Suyan reported. "But their ships are too slow. They won't escape the solar radiation." Dr. Yuna Lee monitored the stellar manipulation from her position, making tiny adjustments to keep the stars under control. "The precision required is incredible," she muttered to herself. "Too little pressure, and the effect fails. Too much and the star goes supernova." But she had spent 50 years perfecting this technology. Every calculation was exact, every gravitational field precisely controlled. The Confederacy's stars were burning exactly as she intended. "You called us children of a dying rock, Admiral," Jimin said, his voice echoing across the galaxy. "You said we were too primitive to deserve salvation. But we learned something from our dying world that you never understood. The Corvellian system was in chaos. Their slug-like leaders oozed through the corridors of their space stations, trying to coordinate an evacuation that was already too late. Their star was expanding, its outer layers reaching toward their colonies with deadly heat. We learned that survival isn't about being the strongest or the most advanced," Jimin continued. "It's about being willing to do whatever it takes to protect your people. It's about remembering those who wronged you." On the Drakmari collective worlds, the jellyfish-like beings pulsed with colors of fear and panic. Their beautiful underwater cities were boiling as their ocean worlds heated up under their destabilizing star. "Your weapons cannot stop us, Admiral," Jimin declared. "Your shields cannot protect you. We have turned your own sons against you, just as nature turned ours against us." Vexthal tried to activate his emergency communication system, but the human signal was overriding everything. "This is impossible," he said to his assistant. "They're just humans. They barely achieved spaceflight. Today, you learn what the children of a dying world became in the darkness," Admiral Jimin concluded. "Today your skies burn, as ours once did." The transmission ended, leaving the Confederacy to face the fury of their own stars. The great council chambers of the Zephorian Confederacy lay in ruins, where once proud alien delegates had gathered to mock the dying worlds of lesser species. Now only broken stone and twisted metal remained. The ornate ceiling had collapsed during the stellar bombardment, letting in the strange orange light that now came from their wounded sun. Ambassador Vexthal knelt among the rubble, his once glossy, black carapace cracked and scarred. His compound eyes, which had once gleamed with arrogance, now reflected only defeat and fear. Around him, the surviving leaders of 12 different alien civilizations waited in silence. Their proud heads bowed. Admiral Jimin Park stood before them, no longer the desperate captain who had fled a dying Earth 50 years ago. His white hair was pulled back severely, and his uniform bore the insignia of the new Terran Empire. Behind him, human soldiers in advanced armor kept watch over the defeated aliens. "You have a choice, Admiral," Jimin announced, his voice echoing through the destroyed chamber. "Accept the terms of surrender, or watch as we finish what we started with your stars." The Terran Accords lay spread across a makeshift table, written in the languages of every surviving Confederacy species. The terms were simple and absolute. All alien military forces would be disbanded. All colonial expansion would require human approval. Every species would contribute resources to the reconstruction effort under human supervision. Vexel's appendages shook as he picked up the signing stylus. Just days before, he had commanded fleets that spanned the galaxy. Now his homeworld was a smoldering ruin, its outer colonies burned away by their own sun. Millions of his people had died in the stellar attacks, and millions more struggled to survive on the few remaining habitable worlds. I signed for the Zephyrian Empire," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The stylus scratched across the document, sealing his people's fate. One by one, the other alien leaders followed. The Altarian delegate, her crystal body cracked and dim, signed with shaking hands. The Drakmari representative pulsed weak colors of submission as he marked the document. The Corvellian leader left a trail of slime as his nervous system betrayed. His fear, Dr. Unili watched the ceremony from her position near the chamber's entrance. Her hair was completely white now, and she walked with a cane, but her mind remained sharp. She had been appointed Director of Stellar Reconstruction, tasked with the impossible job of rebuilding the stars they had destroyed. "The Artificial Star Project is ready to begin," she reported to Admiral Jimin, once the signing was complete. "We can replace the damaged stars with controlled fusion reactors. They'll provide the same light and heat, but will maintain complete control over their output." "How long?" Jimin asked. 5 years for each system. The survivors will have to live on emergency power and imported resources until then." Admiral Jimin nodded. It was a harsh sentence, but fair. Considering what these species had done to Earth, they would rebuild the galaxy, but it would be a galaxy where humanity held ultimate authority. Commander Su Yanhan, now promoted to Admiral of Colonial Operations, supervised the establishment of human oversight stations throughout former Confederacy space. Her ships patrolled the trade routes, ensuring that the defeated species followed their new restrictions. Any attempt at military buildup or unauthorized expansion would be met with immediate stellar punishment. "The Drakmari are asking for additional food supplies," she reported during the daily briefing. "Their ocean worlds are still too hot to support their normal agriculture." Approved, Admiral Jimin decided. "But remind them that continued support depends on their cooperation with our integration program." The integration program was perhaps the most ambitious part of the new order. Young aliens would be educated alongside human children, learning Earth's history and humanity's values. They would grow up understanding that their species had chosen cruelty over compassion, and that only human guidance could prevent such tragedies in the future. In the memorial chamber, aboard New Soul, a different kind of ceremony took place. Every day, elderly survivors of the Exodus gathered before a holographic image of Earth as it had been before the solar flares. Green continents, blue oceans, white clouds, and the lights of human cities twinkling like stars. Admiral Suyan Han placed fresh flowers before the display, as she had done every day for 50 years. The flowers were synthetic now, grown in the hydroponic gardens of the ship, but they still represented the same remembrance and loss. "We saved ourselves," she whispered to the image of their lost world. "But we became something you never could have imagined." The other survivors nodded in agreement. They had been children when Earth died, but they remembered the stories their parents told. Humanity had once been a species that valued mercy, cooperation, and the peaceful exploration of space. The humans who now ruled the galaxy were harder. Colder, shaped by decades of anger and the need for survival, Dr. Yuna Lee joined the memorial service. Moving slowly with her cane, "Do you think they would be proud of us?" she asked. Looking at the hologram of Earth, "They would understand," Admiral Sujan replied. "We did what we had to do to survive, protected the innocent and punished the guilty." Outside the memorial chamber, human engineers worked around the clock to build the artificial stars that would light the galaxy's future. Alien workers labored under human supervision, learning the same stellar engineering techniques that had been used to destroy their worlds. The children of the dying rock had become the shepherds of the stars, forever changed by the cruelty they had witnessed into something the galaxy had never seen before.